Hello, good morning to all of you. I, Sanjeev Kumar, welcome all of you in this course of philosophy, in this class on philosophy optional for UPSC mains exam. So, this course is basically about optional paper of philosophy. Now, before we proceed further, I would like to briefly talk about the UPSC exam as far as philosophy is concerned, the optional paper. So first of all, I would like to talk about the syllabus of UPSC exam. I would like to analyze the syllabus of UPSC exam, UPSC mains exam for philosophy. Then after, we will talk about, so a complete overview of what exactly our syllabus is, what is it that we have to study as a student of philosophy, and then after, what else we need to do. What is importance of philosophy in UPSC exam? Why should we choose philosophy as an optional? What is it that I will do for you in this class? I propose to do for you in this class. And what is it that I expect you to do in this classroom in order to explore, in order to score very high marks in philosophy. So without wasting any time, let us start with our syllabus. So as you know, UPSC syllabus mains exam has two papers, paper 1 and paper 2. Both of these two papers have 250 marks. So overall, you will have 500 marks for philosophy. And as we will see, out of these 500 marks, it is possible for you, it is not very difficult, rather it is easy to score as much as 300 marks. Now let us see what is that syllabus. How is it that these 500 marks are distributed in paper 1 and paper 2? So paper 1 of, so let's talk about firstly, paper 1 of philosophy optional. I hope that you might have seen the syllabus. So if you look at paper 1, then paper 1 is basically theoretical. Paper 2 is more about applied part of philosophy. We will see shortly. So in paper 1, there are two important parts are there. First one is the Western philosophy, and second part is, of course, Indian philosophy. So section 1 in, you can say section A and section B. You have to write the one question compulsorily from this part as well as that part. So there will be 8 questions in your exam. Question number 1, that will be in this part, and question number 5, that will be in this part. That is compulsory, you must write that. Then after, rest of the 6 questions, you have to choose 3 of them, at least one from both of them. So you can choose 2 questions from Western philosophy, you can choose 1 question from Indian philosophy, or the reverse. 2 from the Indian philosophy and 1 from the Western philosophy. But remember, question number 1 and question number 5th, 1 from this section and 5th from this section will be compulsory. It is necessary, you must write that. Now, let us examine a bit of these two parts of the philosophy, Western philosophy and the Indian philosophy. Now, Western philosophy, if you look at it, Western philosophy has a long philosophical tradition since the ancient time to the modern time. So remember, we are talking about the Western philosophy. Now, if you look at the Western philosophy, since the ancient time till today, then we often say that Western philosophy can be divided into 4 important parts, 4 distinct parts. And there is a historical tradition of that since the ancient time to the modern time. So let us see, how do we divide, how do we analyze the Western philosophy the way we are going to do in our course. Suppose, for example, this is time. This is time. And this last point here, where the arrow is, this is the present time, 2026. Now, if you go back from 2026 backward, then suppose, for example, this is 0. This is where the counting starts, counting of the years, counting of the era. Now, this phase is called now as CE, current era. Earlier it was called AD, but nowadays we use the more neutral term, current era, not Christian era. AD basically meant that after the death of Christ, antedate. But nowadays we call it CE, current era. So remember this terminology, we'll keep on using this a number of times. And behind zero, minus, negative, we call that as BCE. Earlier it was simply called BC, means before Christ, but now we often call it BCE, before current era. So that is how we can say time is understood. Normally, it is not about philosophy, it is normally. Now we can see that Western philosophy, in this time, BCE time, zero, we can say backwards, that is called ancient philosophy. Ancient philosophy. In ancient philosophy, our syllabus consists of two important philosophers, Plato and secondly, Aristotle. So two important philosophers are there. There are other philosophers also, but they are not our concern. We are not going to discuss in detail the Stoic or Epicureans and many other philosophers, Neoplatonics, many other philosophers that were there during this period. Now we can say from here to, let's call that as 16th or the 15th century CE. This era is called medieval philosophy. Medieval philosophy. That was the time when Europe had become Christian, almost 300. We'll talk about that in tomorrow's class. Europe had become Christian more or less, and then after, Christian doctrine became the official doctrine of most of the Europe, whole of Europe you can say. And because it became a dogmatic idea, philosophy does not develop in the, the environment of dogma. We will talk about that in maybe today and tomorrow's class. So during this period, there was not much development happened in philosophy. It was just about the regurgitation of the Christian doctrine, Christian ideas. These people did try to incorporate the ideas of Plato and Aristotle into the Christian dogma also. Important role were played by the people like Saint Augustine, Saint Thomas Aquinas, etc. So they tried to integrate the philosophy of Plato and Aristotle into the Christian doctrine, into the Christian philosophy. But otherwise, you can say not much development happened in the, philosophy. That is not in our course. We don't have to study medieval philosophy at all. I may mention a few things while passing, I will tell you, but medieval philosophy we don't have to study, not at all. Then after, from 16th century onwards, 16th century, let's call that as 16th century to 19th century. This period is called modern philosophy. Modern philosophy. So we can say, I will talk about those historical development also in our class, that what actually happened in the 15th and 16th century that led to the development of what we today call as modern philosophy. There was a huge amount of, philosophical activities started happening, in the whole of Europe, that changed the way human society, human civilization, including in our country also. So it changed the way that all these things, happened. So we'll talk about that historical development also. Now, if you look at modern philosophy, then modern philosophy, you can say there are 5 important movements are there in the modern philosophy. One was called rationalism. I will talk a little more about that shortly, just in a moment. Second is called empiricism. Third is called transcendentalism. Fourth is called idealism. And fifth is called positivism. So 5 important movements were there in the modern philosophy. Rationalism, in fact, modern philosophy began with rationalist philosophers. I will give you their names shortly. Then after empiricism, transcendentalism, idealism, and positivism. Out of these 5 important movements of the modern philosophy, last one, positivism, is not in our course. So I will not discuss positivism here, of course, but I will mention that because it's very important for us to have some idea about other things also beyond our syllabus. Why it is so? We'll see that shortly. So 16th to 19th century, these 5 important philosophical movements happened in Europe that led to the emergence of the world that today we are living in. Then you can say last one, 19th century, after that in 20th century, you can say this is the 20th century and 21st century also. In 20th century, we call that as contemporary philosopher. Let's call idea. So we have ancient philosophy, medieval philosophy, modern philosophy, and then for the last 100 years or so, 20th century particularly, the contemporary philosophy. Now if you look at contemporary philosophy, then you will see that in contemporary philosophy there are there are 6 main movements are there in the contemporary philosophy. Just as in the modern philosophy we have 5 important philosophical movements, so similarly in the contemporary philosophy we have 6 important philosophical movements. So let's name them a bit. First one would be logical positivism. We'll talk about a bit more shortly. Second one would be the linguistic analysis. Second one, linguistic analysis. Third one is called phenomenology. Fourth is called existentialism. Fifth is called pragmatism. And last, finally, sixth is called postmodernism. Modernism was that, postmodernism. So in the modern contemporary philosophy, let's call that contemporary philosophy, there are 6 important philosophical movements have been there. Logical positivism, linguistic analysis, phenomenology, existentialism, pragmatism, and then finally postmodernism. So that is how we can say the whole of Western philosophy can be put into that thing. 2 important philosophers in ancient time, Plato and Aristotle. There are 5 movements in the modern time. Forget about the medieval. We will not talk about Thomas Aquinas, we will not talk about St. Augustine and many other philosophers of that time, particularly religious philosophers. Then after in modern philosophy, contemporary philosophy, we have these 6 important movements that is the center of philosophy in the world today maybe. Now, the next important question is that how is it that all of these philosophical traditions in the Western philosophy are related to each other? How do they connect with each other? So just to have whole perspective of the Western philosophy, let's briefly talk about the connectivity, connection, relationship between them, the flow of philosophical development in the Western philosophy in this manner. Let's briefly talk about that. So, and out of these 6, which is there, these you can say 6 plus 5, and these 2, there are 13. So these out of these 13 philosophical movements, you can see there are in your course there are 20 philosophers that you have to study. 20 philosophers. So let us see that all these in Western philosophy. So let us see that how these 20 philosophers in the Western philosophical tradition fall into this one. This tradition, this you can say scheme of the thing that we have talked about. Let's talk about that. So first important philosopher, of course, as I told you, was Plato. Now this number will be about the philosophers that you have to study. I will write the name of some other philosophers also who is not part of your syllabus without number. So first important philosopher that we will study is Plato, the ancient Greek philosopher. Plato is considered to be the beginning of Western philosophy. Western philosophy began, though there were other, you can say, pre-Socratic philosophers also, before Plato also. We will talk about them also briefly in our later classes. That Plato is the beginning, considered to be the beginning of the Western philosophy. And the second important philosopher in the ancient time in Western tradition was Aristotle, student of Plato. Now, Plato and Aristotle, as we will see in our class a few days later, Plato and Aristotle, created two very distinct philosophical tradition, philosophical tendency that shaped the modern philosophy throughout the Western world, throughout the history. So they are the most important philosophers, perhaps both of them, most important philosophers in the Western intellectual tradition. So much so that many people say that almost whole of the Western philosophy is just about these two. There is a modern philosopher, I will mention him in a later class. There is a modern philosopher called as North White. So North White had said the whole of Western philosophy is just a series of footnotes to Plato. So everything that you see in the Western philosophy is actually just a footnote of what Plato had said. Every idea in the modern Western philosophy, or in the Western philosophy, somehow you can find that in the Plato. That was a little exaggeration, but still that does appear to be closer to the fact. More appropriately, we can say it was Plato and Aristotle. They were the originals. Somebody had said, Will Durant perhaps had said, that every person, every human being is at birth is either a Platonian or an Aristotelian. So everything about philosophy is either Plato or Aristotle. Expansion of that, elaboration of that, or extension of that, development of that, whatever you can call. So at birth we are either a Platonian or we are an Aristotelian. So that is the importance of Plato and Aristotle, the most important philosopher in the Western intellectual tradition. Then after Aristotle, as we have seen in the previous timeline, that Western philosophy had a decline. For the next 1,000 years, more than 1,500 years after that, not much development happened in the Western philosophy. Europe went through what we call sometimes as a dark age. No development, no, you can say progress, no, you can say nothing new happened in the philosophy, not much of interest. So that was Plato and that was Aristotle. Now, with the rise of modernity in the 16th century, we will talk in a later class what happened in the 15th and 16th century that gave birth to the modernity, modern philosophy as we call it. So, in the modern philosophy, if you look at it, the Plato's ideas gave rise to what we call rationalism. Not exactly Plato's idea, but anybody who is similar to Plato, who is closer to Plato in his philosophical orientation, would be a rationalist. In our course, there are three important rationalist philosophers that you have to study. So, number one is Plato, number two was Aristotle, then third important philosopher that you have to study is Descartes, the father of modern philosophy. He is often known. We'll talk about Descartes in much detail, maybe a week later or so. Then after, fourth important philosopher in our syllabus will be Spinoza. Baruch Spinoza, one of the very important philosopher in the modern time, rationalist. Then after, fifth one is Leibniz, Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz. So these three important philosophers were the rationalist philosophers. We'll discuss much detail of all the three, maybe in a week's time and all, in our class days to come. Now, if you look at Aristotle, then Aristotle's tradition, the people who were more like Aristotle minded, you can say, Aristotelian minded, well, they gave rise to a second branch of philosophy, second movement in modern philosophy, that is called empiricism. So empiricism is a rival philosophy of rationalism. We will see that a few days later, the totally opposite of that in that sense. The most important empiricist philosophers were people like Thomas Hobbes, Francis Bacon. Bacon is not in your syllabus, that's why I will not number him. We will briefly discuss about Bacon's idea, because Bacon's ideas are very important for the emergence of modern empirical philosophy, empiricist philosophy. So Bacon is one of the initial first sort of, you can say, the contemporary of Descartes, or slightly earlier than Descartes also. Bacon was the one. Then after 5, 6th. 6th was John Locke. 7th would be Bishop George Berkeley, and the most important of them all would be David Hume. So in your course, these three important empiricist philosophers you have to study: John Locke, George Berkeley, and David Hume. Though I will briefly mention, maybe 15 minutes, half an hour, Bacon also. Because Bacon's ideas are very important to understand the empiricist philosophy in general. So these are the two important rival branches. Then after, how the philosophy developed after that? Well, then after, you can say both of these two philosophies were combined together in one systematic, you can say, unification, a systematic synthesis. That systematic synthesis was done by perhaps the greatest philosopher in the modern time, Mr. Immanuel Kant. His ideas are called transcendentalism. Of course, that was Immanuel Kant. That will be 9th. Let's call it 9th. 9th, Immanuel Kant. It's not I, it is 9 number. So, Kant is considered to be one of the most important, not one of the, perhaps the most important philosopher in the, you can say, whole of Western philosophy in general. Nobody has surpassed, maybe after Aristotle, nobody can surpass the importance and, can say, influence of Immanuel Kant in the modern philosophy. So he combined both of them together. He created a new system that is called transcendentalism. Now, after Immanuel Kant, let me make it smaller. After Kant, after Kant, you can say, again, transcendentalism also gave rise to two different sets of philosophical movement. So out of them, those people who were more like Plato, closer rationalist maybe, rationalism was over after Immanuel Kant, because he actually destroyed both rationalism and empiricism and created a new system of philosophy. But those people who were closer to rationalism, they were called idealism. And those who were closer to empiricism, that philosophy was called positivism. Idealism and positivism. So it is not exactly empiricism, but you can say empirical minded people and rational minded people, Platonic people, and remember, everybody is either a Platonic or he is Aristotelian. So that is now. Who are the idealist philosophers? The most important idealistic philosopher that we have to study, well, that will be 10th in our course, will be Hegel. But there are others also whom we will briefly mention in our class, called Fichte and Schelling also. But most important of them was, so after Immanuel Kant, perhaps Hegel was the most influential philosopher in the modern time. We'll talk a lot about ideas of Friedrich Hegel in our class later on. Positivism. Who were the most important positivist philosopher? Positivism is not in your syllabus, so you don't have to worry about that. But still, well, it will be advisable that we should know the name of the philosophers who were positive, because positivism did have some impact on some philosophical tradition that we have to study. So, who are the most important, I can say, positivist philosopher? They were Auguste Comte. I hope you might have heard about Auguste Comte. Auguste Comte is the father of, can say, modern sociology. He established sociology as a new science away from philosophy, but in philosophical orientation, he was a positivist. Then after, you can say, Herbert Spencer, another sociologist. Then after, Charles Darwin, John Stuart Mill. So they were the most important positivist philosophers. So Fichte was another one, Schelling was another one. I'm not numbering them because they are not a part of your syllabus, but it will be advisable, it will be beneficial to keep to know the name of these, to remember the name of these people. I will briefly mention positivism also in our class, that what exactly positivism means. Who are the people who are positivist? Because positivism gave rise to another three set of philosophical movement that is a part of your course. So that is positive, idealism and positivism. Now further, so these five were the modern philosophy. That was ancient philosophy, that is the modern philosophy. Rationalists like these three, Descartes, Spinoza and Leibniz. Empiricists like these four, Bacon, Locke, Berkeley, Hume. Then after, transcendentalists like Immanuel Kant. Then after, idealists like Friedrich Hegel, Fichte and Schelling. Positivists like Comte, Spencer, Mill, Darwin, etc. Then after, we can say that idealist movement gave rise to three another set of, philosophical movements. So first important philosophical movement that came out of idealism is known as phenomenalism. In our course, we have to study, 10th was that, 11th. You can say Edmund Husserl. So Edmund Husserl is the phenomenologist philosopher that we have to study. That was the sort of, offshoot of idealism there. Then after, second important group of philosopher that came out of idealism, they are called existentialism. In your course, there are three important existential philosophers that you have to study. The first important existential philosopher that will be 12th year was Soren Kierkegaard, Danish philosopher, a very important of the modern philosophers. Then after 13th will be Martin Heidegger, and 14th will be Jean-Paul Sartre. They are part of your syllabus. We have to study all of them. Though Heidegger is sometimes also put in phenomenalist. Of course, phenomenalism and existentialism are very closely related to each other. Sartre was also somehow a student of Husserl. Heidegger was also a student of Husserl. And Kierkegaard came much earlier than Husserl. We will talk about that historically also. Out of these four philosophers, Kierkegaard was the first. Then after, we have Husserl, and both of them were his students. But close was Heidegger. So Heidegger is sometimes also put as phenomenologist. But in our course, we will discuss Heidegger as an existential philosopher. So that was the three important existential philosophers. Second important, three important movements out of idealism, two. Then after, we have the third one that came out of idealism. And that third movement that came out of idealism is known as postmodernism. We don't have to study postmodernism in our class, that is not in your course. But the most important postmodernist philosopher was Jacques Derrida. Jacques Derrida, Michel Foucault. But we will not discuss them, they are not part of our course. So they are the three important movements, philosophical movements that came out of the idealism. So that is what idealism was. Then after, finally, positivism also gave rise to three important philosophical movements. So positivism also gave rise to three important philosophical movements. First was pragmatism. You don't have to study pragmatism, it is not a part of your course, your syllabus. But we will in our class briefly discuss, just as positivism we will discuss maybe in half an hour or so. Pragmatism also we will discuss. You should be aware of these terminology. Who are the pragmatist philosophers? The most important pragmatist philosophers were people like William James, They are not part of your syllabus, so I will not number them, or John Dewey, etc. So pragmatism was essentially an American school of thought. All of them were the European philosophy. Now with pragmatism, you can say Western philosophy moved to America. So pragmatism was one. Another very important branch of positivism that you have to study in your course is called linguistic analysis. The most important linguistic analytical philosopher was Ludwig Wittgenstein. There are two chapters in your syllabus about Wittgenstein, early Wittgenstein and later Wittgenstein. So we'll discuss a lot in detail about Wittgenstein's philosophy in some later classes. So Wittgenstein will be 13th, 14th, 15th. So it will be 15th philosopher. And then after that, finally, there is another important branch of modern positivism that is called, you can say, logical positivism. Though in your syllabus, they have not named a logical philosopher who represents the logical positivism, but in our class, most importantly, we will discuss A.J. Ayer. A.J. Ayer as a representative of the ideas of logical positivism. So that is how the philosophy. So overall, you can say that this is how Western philosophy can be summarized. The whole of Western philosophy from the ancient time to the modern time. So there are 16 philosophers till now. So we can start with Plato and Aristotle. Then after Platonic ideas led to rationalism. Three important philosophers within that: Descartes, Spinoza and Leibniz. Aristotle's ideas led to the emergence of empiricism in a modern philosophy. Four important philosophers are there. Three in your syllabus: Locke, Berkeley and Hume. Then after Kant synthesized all of them. Then after you can see Kantian idea of transcendentalism led to idealism. First of all, most important philosopher of idealism was Friedrich Hegel. And second was positivism. People like Comte, Spencer, Mill, Darwin, etc. were the most important positivist philosopher. We don't have to study them. Idealism led to the development of three important philosophical movements in the modern time. Phenomenologist, our syllabus include Husserl in that, Edmund Husserl. Then after existentialism, three important philosophers are there in that: Soren Kierkegaard, Martin Heidegger and Jean-Paul Sartre. Then after we have postmodernism that is represented by people like Jacques Derrida, Michael Foucault, etc. Not in our course. Then after positivist philosophy led to the development of these one further: pragmatism, not in our course, developed by William James and John Dewey. Then after linguistic analysis, most important philosopher was Wittgenstein. Then after logical positivism, most important philosopher was A.J. Ayer. So this is how we can understand the whole of Western philosophy. Keep these terminologies in your mind. So much before we will go finally to those people, we'll keep on using these terminology: existential philosopher, logical positivist philosopher, rationalist, empiricist. Remember, one very important thing that you have to do is that to be very much familiar with the philosophical terminology, keywords. So these are first set of terminology that describe the whole of Western philosophy, starting from Plato till today's time, 21st century. So these are the 16 philosophers here in that scheme of the thing. Along with them, we have to study, you can say, a few more philosophers. For example, 17th one will be Bertrand Russell. Then after we have to study another important philosopher of modern time, contemporary world, G.E. Moore. 19th, another important one is Quine. And 28th will be Strawson. So they are also in the modern contemporary philosophers. So we can put them, Russell can be put closely towards the logical and logical positivism plus linguistic analysis. So they will also be somewhere on these things, but we will talk about them separately. So overall, there are 20 philosophers that you have to study in the Western philosophy. That is your syllabus of paper 1, part 1, Western philosophy. Now in this Western philosophy, for example, in this whole scheme that we have created here, that we have sort of developed here, what will be our purpose? How would we try to approach all of them? That's also very important to know. So in all of these philosophers, whenever we discuss, remember, we will devote at least 2 to 3 days, sometimes 4 also, to some philosopher, well, like Immanuel Kant, to each of these philosophers. Kant will develop a lot much, because Kant is considered to be central figure. You know, there is a Will Durant had written somewhere that just as in geography, all road leads to Rome, Western geography, similarly in philosophy, all road leads to Kant. So everything came to Kant and everything came out of Kant. So in this sense, you can say that Kant is the father of modern philosophy. Everything in modern philosophy has somehow come out of the Kantian theory. Without going through Immanuel Kant, you can never understand the modern contemporary philosophy. So he is the most important one. We may develop maybe 3-4 days also for Immanuel Kant, but for other philosophers, we'll discuss 2 to 3 days. Now in these 2 to 3 days, what we will do here is that, first of all, we have syllabus. Remember, we don't have to study the whole of, I can say, philosophy of each of these philosophers. These philosophers have given, can say, a huge philosophy, very, very elaborate, very difficult, very extensive philosophy. You don't have to study in everything that is given by those philosophers. Because, as I told you, that Plato is often considered as Plato and Aristotle are considered the father of the philosophy in the Western world. So almost any philosophical idea you can talk about, you can find ideas of Plato there, Aristotle there. You don't have to study everything that Plato taught us. You don't have to study everything that Aristotle gave to us. That is not our course, that is not our purpose here. So we have a syllabus given by UPSC. We have to basically focus on our syllabus. You don't have to go much farther than, for example, can say Plato and Aristotle, both of them have given moral philosophy also. That is not in your course. Kant, we don't have to study Kant's moral philosophy here. Though moral philosophy of Kant, Plato and Aristotle, you will have to study in your ethics paper, GS paper 4. But in your philosophy optional course, we don't have to study Kant's moral philosophy here in detail or Kant's aesthetic philosophy. So we don't have to study everything that these people talked about. We have to limit ourselves only to the topics that is given in our syllabus, mostly. But in order to study that particular part of philosopher, we will talk about a little of the extra things also that philosopher talk about. So that will be philosopher, that particular philosopher. So we will not discuss in much detail about Kantian ethics, for example, or aesthetics, for example, but we will mention briefly while passing, so that we can have an understanding, complete understanding, a comprehensive understanding of the syllabus that is given to us by the UPSC. Then after, we will slightly go beyond that also, and we will discuss the ism. Which ism that philosopher and our syllabus belongs to. So for example, along with Descartes, we will talk about rationalism. Descartes we will study within rationalism. Locke we will study within empiricism. So we need to have some idea about the philosophical school of thought under which each philosopher actually can be considered to be located. So that will be ism. But we will not limit only to that. We will slightly go beyond that also. Beyond that also, you can say, beyond that, what will be the beyond that? Well, we will also talk about the social, political, cultural, and most importantly, intellectual background under which these philosophies actually evolved. Because remember, any philosophy, it does not develop you can say, emerged out of vacuum. There is a whole philosophical background. There is a whole, you can say, historical, cultural. So these philosophers came into being. One important reason being that they were in the Christian country. Had these philosophers been in China or in India, then their philosophy would have been a little different. We will see that also later. So we have to understand the historical background, the cultural background, the chronological background, the intellectual background. So for example, one important reason that modern philosophy developed so fast during that period was also the development of modern science. It is very interesting to see that why is that philosophical development did not happen so fast in countries like India, Arabia, China, etc. Why is it that modern philosophy developed in Western world? One reason could be, there are other reasons also. One reason could be that in Western world, Europe particularly, in the 15th, 16th century, there were parallel development between philosophy and modern science. So philosopher, of course, these philosophers played a very important role. Philosophers like, you can say, Descartes, or you can say Spinoza, Leibniz, Locke, Hume, Kant, Berkeley also. But well, during the same time, a parallel development in science was also taking place, where the people like sort of Francis Bacon, then after Copernicus, Galileo, Kepler, Brahe, or you can say Newton, Hertz, Huygens, so all of Hooke, Robert Hooke, so all of these people were doing something important in the modern science. So in this sense, you can say the development of philosophy actually influenced the development of modern science, definitely. But equally importantly, development of modern science also influenced the development of modern philosophy. So in order to understand modern philosophy, we have to understand a little, not much. We have to understand how is it that modern science actually developed, and how is it that ideas of people like Galileo, Kepler, etc., Newton influenced the development of modern philosophy. So we can see that if you go back further, then people like, you can say, Immanuel Kant, people like Descartes, Leibniz, etc., they were very much influenced by the mathematicians of their own time. How mathematical development happened in, you can say, geometry, in arithmetic, etc. Immanuel Kant was very much influenced by Sir Isaac Newton. So he was actually a Newtonian earlier, before he became a full-time philosopher. So we cannot understand the ideas of people like Immanuel Kant, for example, without understanding some philosophy of, Newtonian science. So we will discuss that also. We will not discuss the whole science. We will not discuss the Newton's law of gravitation and laws of motion here. But we will discuss the philosophical undercurrent, philosophical background, which actually led to the emergence of modern science also. So Western philosophy developed mainly because one of the important reasons being that science and philosophy developed in parallel. Had science not developed in that way, then perhaps development of philosophy would have been very different there. That might be a problem, okay, not a problem, I guess. That might have led to a different direction of philosophical development in the countries like India and China. So that is important. So this is the meaning of this larger circle. We have to understand socio-political, again, political. So ideas of politics during that time, like I can say French Revolution or Glorious Revolution in England, the war of, you can say, religion, Treaty of Westphalia, all of those are political developments. So those political developments did influence the philosophy of people like Leibniz or John Locke, later on even David Hume. So political ideas, intellectual, cultural. So the cultural tradition of Christianity did have some impact on the development of modern philosophy in Western world. We will talk about that also briefly. So we have to keep in mind the socio-political background, cultural, intellectual background under which these philosophies actually emerged. So briefly we will discuss that also. Then combined together all of that, you can say, will be surrounded in the complete Western philosophy. Western philosophy. So Western philosophy, you can say, is the largest circle. Within that, there is a certain social political background. Within that, there is a particular philosophical tradition, ism. Then after within that, there is a particular philosopher. Within that, our syllabus. So we will focus mainly on this central circle. But we will somehow can say keep on moving between the outer circles also to have a better grasp of the inner circle. That is whole of the Western philosophy. Now, if we see that whole, suppose this is the now Western philosophy. Now, if you look at similarly, you can say Indian philosophy, then in Indian philosophy also we have a similar circles. Though in Indian philosophy, this type of circle is difficult to break. We'll talk about that also, why not. But we have similarly, so this is what we can say Indian philosophy. So our course consists of these tools. The whole world is philosophy, board is philosophy. So remember, we don't have to study the whole philosophy in our course here. We don't have to become a philosopher, a professional philosopher, you can say technical philosopher, etc. We don't have to become that. So there are other circles also, like Chinese philosophy, Arabian philosophy, Japanese philosophy. Now they are not something that we have to study. So remember, philosophy is huge. This whole board is philosophy. One part is Western philosophy, that is our one important focus. Another part will be the Indian philosophy, that will be another important focus. The rest of that we'll simply ignore. They are not the part of our syllabus, they are not the part of our course. So that is how we can say, we can understand the whole of Western philosophy as such here. That is the one part of your paper 1, Western philosophy. Then after we have Indian philosophy. So one half of your syllabus in the paper 1 will be about Indian philosophy. Indian philosophy comparatively, I would say, easier to understand. There are two reasons for that. First of all, well, we all are Indians. So somehow, more or less, we all are aware of Indian philosophy. There is a difference between Western and Indian philosophy in this sense that Western philosophy, only philosophers knew. So when philosophers did not talk about Aristotle and Plato, they were lost. We'll talk about that loss also in the next class. They were lost completely. But in India, philosophy became part of day-to-day life. So life and real life and philosophy were not so distinct in India. So because of that, as we grow up in India, many philosophical ideas are already taught to us. We automatically learn most of them. So we are aware. Many things in the Western philosophy you may not be even aware. That will be altogether new to you. But in Indian philosophy, we are somehow aware of many things. Number 1. Number 2, we can say in Indian philosophy, conceptually, it is not very difficult to follow. A little factual, you can say, a lot of things you have to remember here rather than conceptualize. Western philosophy is very conceptual. So that is the second thing. Third thing is that Indian philosophy more or less have been ancient philosophy only. In, you can say, Western philosophy, as we had seen, that a lot of philosophical developments have happened in the modern time, starting from 16th century till 20th century. In Indian philosophy, not much development happened in philosophy. There are reasons for that. We will talk about that later. So in this sense, you can say Indian philosophy will be a bit easier for us to conceptualize. So if you look at Indian philosophy, then we can say Indian philosophy again can be divided into two traditions. One is called Orthodox tradition and second is called heterodox tradition. So there are two important traditions have been there in the ancient Indian philosophy. Orthodox traditions are the ones that believe in that accept the authority of the Veda. So Veda is the origin source of all the philosophical tradition that emerged in the Orthodox tradition. On the other hand, heterodox tradition, they rejected the authority of the Veda. They were more radical somehow. Sometimes even they became, I can say, atheist also, totally rejected the conception of God, supernatural power, heaven, hell, etc. We'll talk about that. In heterodox tradition, we have to study three important philosophy. Remember, in Indian philosophy, we don't discuss philosopher. We'll discuss a philosophical tradition, philosophical school of thought. In Western philosophy, individuals were more important. In Indian philosophy, we don't know who those individuals were. So ideas of a number of individuals, well, got conceptualized into a system. So ancient Indian philosophy was more systemic rather than Western philosophy. We will talk about that much detail later on. So first one is Charvak. Second important, can say, heterodox tradition is Jainism. And third one is Buddhism. So these three important orthodox traditions are there that we have to study in our class. You are aware of many of these ideas generally, so it will be easier for us to follow them through. Then after, in orthodox tradition, we have six important six important schools of thought. First one was, we will talk about Nyaya. Second one, we will talk about Vaisheshik. Second, we'll talk about Vaisheshik. Third will be Sankhya. Fourth would be Yoga. Fifth would be Yoga, and fifth will be Mimamsa. And last, sixth will be Uttar Mimamsa or Vedanta. So there are six, you can say, orthodox traditions are there in Indian philosophy: Nyaya, Vaisheshik, Sankhya, Yoga, Mimamsa, and Vedanta. And three heterodox traditions, you can say, Charvak, Jainism, and Buddhism. So these are the, you can say, or let's call it 6, then after 7, 8, and 9. Then after, finally, in modern Indian philosophy, we have to study the ideas of Sri Aurobindo. So in modern philosophy, Indian philosophy, there are the 10 important things that you have to actually study. 9 systems of philosophy and 1 important philosopher in the modern time. So that is how paper 1 will be there. Paper 1, part 2 of paper 1, as you can appreciate from this discussion, would be a bit easier for you to follow, because only these 10 things are there, and in Western philosophy 20 philosophers are there. Here only 10 systems are there. So that is how first paper can be understood, both Western philosophy and the Indian philosophy. Then after, we'll go to the paper 2. Paper 2 of your syllabus is applied philosophy. There are 2 important parts are there. First is, of course, socio-political philosophy. I will not write all of that, I have written it here. So, socio-political philosophy. These are the important topics that you have to study. It is something that is more applied in the modern time. You have to understand. So, philosophy must be useful. So whatever you study in the philosophy paper 1, it must be useful for you. It must actually help you to understand your society better, to, you can say, analyze your society, your life in a better manner. So there are the 10 important chapters are there in the part 1 of the second paper. So that is social and political ideals, in which you have to study equality, justice, and liberty. Again, remember, you will discuss these ideas, equality, justice, and liberty, etc., in our paper 1 also. Liberty, for example, we may discuss a little of that in the classes of, you can say, people like John Locke, whatever. Equality, we may discuss that in the class of Immanuel Kant, maybe a little. So we will discuss all of these things again. Sovereignty, we have to study Austin, Bodin, and Cortelyar. They are not in our paper 1, but equality, justice, and liberty will flow from paper 1. Then after, individual and state, rights, duties, and accountability, forms of government, monarchy, theocracy, and democracy. In that forms of government, again, we will discuss the ideas of people like Plato also. What did Plato say about democracy? Because they were the people who actually originated the philosophical grounding of democracy. Then after, political ideologies, anarchism, Marxism, and socialism, we will discuss briefly about that. Humanism, secularism, multiculturalism. So multiculturalism is more like post-modern philosophy, like We'll discuss that in later class. Then after crime and punishment, corruption, mass violence, genocide, capital punishment. Then development and social progress, gender discrimination, female feticide, land and property rights, empowerment. And in caste discrimination that is unique and specific to India, we'll discuss the ideas of Mahatma Gandhi and Bhimrao Ambedkar. So that will be the part 1 of the second paper. So after that, one question compulsorily you have to write, first question, and rest of the 3 you have to choose at least 1 or at most 2. Then after, the second part of your paper 2 would be philosophy of religion. Philosophy of religion. In this also we have 10 chapters here. In philosophy of religion, many ideas we will discuss in paper 1 also, like notion of God, attributes, relations to man and the world. So in Indian, we will discuss about Indian philosophy there also. What did Mimamsik, Naiyayic or Vedantic, etc. say about God? In Western, we will talk about ideas of Descartes, Leibniz, Kant, Hume. What did they say about God and all? We will talk about that in paper 1 also. Proofs for the existence of God and their critique. We'll discuss that in Western philosophy also. People like Descartes, Leibniz and Spinoza. All the 3 gave a rational explanation, rational proof for the existence of God. We'll discuss Kant also, who rejected that rational explanation. So we'll discuss all of that. In Indian philosophy also, Charvaks did not believe in God. They rejected the existence of God at all. So we'll talk about them also. And then after, other orthodox tradition like Mimamsa and Vaisheshik, etc., they did talk about the existence of God and proof of their existence. We'll talk about that. Problem of evil is a very important and interesting topic of your syllabus. That if you believe in God, religion, then if the God is all omnipotent, omniscient, if everything that happens in the world happens because of the will of the God, then why does evil exist? What makes evil to exist in the world? Why is it that God does not prevent evil in the world? So philosophers throughout history have grappled with this problem, throughout history, in Indian tradition also and Western tradition also. They have tried to justify the existence of evil also. We'll talk about that in many philosophers like Leibniz, for example. He had talked about why does evil exist, and many other philosophers has talked about in a similar fashion that what is the role of evil in the human society. Why does evil exist? How can we eliminate evil? That's the problem of evil. If everything happens according to the will of the God, then evil must also happen because of the will of the God. Then why does God, who is all powerful, all good, why does he allow evil to happen? Is he not capable of eliminating evil in the world? If not, then he is not omnipotent. If he can but he does not, then he is himself evil. Why is it that? So we'll talk about all these problems in much detail in our classes later on here. Then after soul, immortality, rebirth, liberation, that is a part of, you can say, particularly Indian philosophy, though in Western philosophy also some philosophers talk about the you can say rebirth and liberation. We will discuss all of that. Religious experience, nature and object of religious experience, Indian and Western. We will talk about ideas of Soren Kierkegaard, particularly in that, and many Indian philosophers relevant to that. Religion without God. There are 2 important religions are there. They are said to be without God: Buddhism and Jainism. That's why they are heterodox tradition. So God has no place in both of those 2 philosophies. Then after religion and morality, what is the role of it? Does religion actually improve morality or it hampers morality? How the 2 are related to each other? How the 2 influence each other? Then after religious pluralism and the problem of absolute truth. There are some religions like Islam, Christianity and Judaism. They believe in the idea of absolute truth. They hold that truth is absolute, only one truth is there. And anybody who does not believe in that truth, then that person is evil. On the other hand, many religious traditions in India, they do not believe in the absolute truth. Jainism is the most important one. So Jains talk about, you can say the multiple truths. Anekantavad. We'll talk about that in a. So there are multiple truths are there. Plural. Truth is plural rather than singular. Truth is relative rather than absolute. So we will talk about both of those 2 ideas. In India, we have absolute truth also, and plural, you can say the relative truth also. We'll talk all about that in our class later. Then finally, nature of religious language, analogical, symbolic, cognitivist and non-cognitive, role, reason and faith, how the two are related to each other. Cognitive is basically the reason and non-cognitive is more about faith, emotions, etc., feelings. So that will be your philosophy of religion. So these are the 10 important chapters from part 2 of paper 2. Here also you can say 4 questions will be asked in your exam. Question 5th, first 4 questions will be in part 1, socio-political philosophy. Second one will be this, in which you can say 5th question will be compulsory, and out of the rest of the 3, 6, 7th and 8, you can choose at least 1 or at most 2. That is how you have to answer this one. So this is your, you can say, syllabus that you have to study as a philosophy optional. Now, next important thing that I would like to briefly discuss in our class here today, in this orientation class, will be that why should you choose philosophy as an optional paper? Philosophy, as you might be aware, if you are in the, you can say, touch with the recent developments, then you may be aware that philosophy has become a quite popular subject in the UPSC exam in the last few years. Why is it that philosophy is becoming more popular? And why is it that you should also consider philosophy as an important part of your civil service planning? So why should you choose philosophy as an optional? Let's briefly discuss about the importance of philosophy, beauty of philosophy, the positive feature of philosophy for your UPSC exam. So we'll talk about a few important things. First important reason why should you choose philosophy is that the syllabus of philosophy is relatively short. Relatively very short syllabus. So in philosophy you can see, as we have seen here, this philosophy syllabus is not only short, it is very compact. It is very compact, it is very well defined. It is very much well defined, and well, because of all of that, it is quite manageable, very easily manageable by all of you. Not only that, philosophy syllabus is more static. Not much change happens in that. Not much. So philosophy syllabus is very short in the sense we have seen here that how beautifully we can understand, we can imagine the whole syllabus here. 20 philosophers in the Western philosophy, 10 philosophical tradition in Indian philosophy, 10 ideas in the political, social political philosophy, 10 ideas in the philosophy of religion. That is it. It's very compact and well defined. In each of the philosophers, you know, that topics are given that you have to study this, this and this, and only that. Not more than that. You don't have to study, as I told you, the whole of Immanuel Kant. You don't have to study the whole of Aristotle and Plato also. So, if you look at it, each of the, again, if you look at the Western philosophy, then you'll see that 20 philosophers are there. And I believe on an average, from each philosopher, not more than 4 or 5 questions can possibly be asked. Even if you take on higher side 5 questions, then well, there will be not more than 100 questions. So from the Western philosophy, they cannot possibly ask more than 100 questions. So if you prepare those 100 questions well, how do you prepare? We'll talk about that shortly. But if you prepare those 100 questions or so, then you will see that almost anything that they can possibly ask, you should be able to answer that. No other paper will give, no other optional paper will give you that type of clarity. So it's very short, it's very compact, very well defined, that only 4 or 5 questions will be there from each philosopher. So almost 80 to 100 questions are the maximum limit that you have to learn. Nothing more in paper 1, Western philosophy. Similarly in Indian philosophy, that 10 philosophical traditions are there in Indian philosophy. Out of 10, well, not more than 4 questions can be asked from each of them. So 40. So overall in paper 1, you have to study around, you can say 120 to, I would say, 150 questions. That is it. If you learn 120 to 150 questions, then paper 1 is done. Nothing else. And again, it's the interesting thing is that it is very static also. That, let's say, once you prepare for these questions again, 100 and 150, you don't have to add something more to that, because this philosophy, Kant is dead more than 200 years ago. So you don't have to, you can say 300 years ago maybe. So you don't have to, not 300, 1800 or so, it is basically 200 years or so, 220 years. So Kant is dead 200 years ago. So he's not going to give you something new. Whatever he has given, it is already there. So there is no change, there is no updation, there is no upgradation, there is no addition into that. Once you prepare, your preparation is done once and for all. So I believe that if a sincere student, any sincere student, if you study appropriately, then if you are very comprehensive in our preparation, then just 5 without any background of philosophy. Even if you are a science student, you are an engineer, a doctor, or whatever subject is your graduation subject and all, almost anybody can prepare the whole of philosophy in 5 to 6 months. That is it. Starting from scratch, starting from the definition of the word philosophy till the last point, it will not take more than 5 to 6 months. So that is the maximum limit. And again, for those 5-6 months, you don't have to study 8 hours for philosophy or 10 hours for philosophy, 4 or 5 hours every day. Then also you can master the philosophy. So it is very easy. So this importance of this is that philosophy can give you very good marks in these small preparation, and more importantly, you are left with lots of time for other paper, GS paper, because GS is much larger, much extensive. A lot of current affairs, updation, dynamic things and all. You have to keep yourself updated on that. So you will have enough time for that. Other papers will keep you, other optional subject will keep you engaged in the optional only. In philosophy, that will not be there. Ek baar tayari ho gayi, once you have done, then you are done once and for all. Keep on revising for a few times, that is it. Keep on doing some writing practice, that is it. So it gives you a lot of, can say, spare time for other papers. That is the one important advantage of philosophy, for which you should consider philosophy easily. Then second reason, why should you opt for philosophy? Second reason is that philosophy, as we will see, has a very high scoring potential. Very high scoring potential, because you know that in philosophy, most important thing is that we have to be focused more on the conceptual clarity. Philosophy does not require a lot of rote learning. You do not have to do rhetorification. So basically concepts are there. If you understand those concepts, you can look at the concept behind the whole of syllabus itself. How it's starting from Plato and Aristotle, we go to contemporary philosophy of the 20th century. So there is a whole conceptual clarity, conceptual, you can say, flow in your syllabus. So it is more about concept. Once you understand the basic concept well, you don't have to remember much. It does not, can say, require a lot of rote learning or memorization or rhetorification, etc. So once you understand the theories, like theory of form of Plato or transcendental analysis or Indian concept of dharma, moksha, karma, etc., then after that's it. Only thing that you have to do is to write. So it will be very easy to, learn philosophy. It's very, very, you can say, philosophy is a very logical subject. So our mind works in such a manner that philosophy automatically fits into that. Other things can be something that has to be a little, can say, unnatural also. Philosophy is so natural to our mind that, our mind has natural tendency to grasp and put that in the perspective. It's a very logical subject. Not only that, in philosophy, it is possible, it is easy rather, to write very systematic and structured answers. So every answer we can write has a set pattern. Like, for example, we have thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. So that is one way to write the answer. Another way is that if some concepts are there, then you have to write simply a definition. Definition first, then after explanation. definition, then explanation, then after example, then after example, and then finally criticism. So whatever you can see, question can possibly ask, we can start by defining the term, then after explain them, give some example of that, and then finally give criticism. That is sequence. So once you understand the sequence of the things, then after you see that it will be very easy. You don't have to spend lots of time to frame your answer. Frame can be done either in this way, thesis, antithesis, and synthesis, or in terms of definition to criticism. So it's very easy to formulate answer, frame answer, write a very systematic, structured answer in 200 words or whatever time that is given to you. That is second reason for which you can seriously consider philosophy as an optional. Then after, another important reason for which you have to study, you can possibly consider philosophy, is the very strong overlap. Very strong overlap with the general studies. So many part of your GS, you can see, will have very important contribution of philosophy. Even otherwise, even if you don't have the philosophy, then also you have to learn philosophy for them. Perhaps the one paper where philosophy plays the most important role is, you can say, GS paper 4, that is ethics. Ethics, almost main part of your ethics is about philosophy. So like you can say, many of the philosophers, Plato, Aristotle, Kant, Hume, Locke, Sartre, Martin Heidegger, so all of these are the moral philosophers also. So their idea, if you understand their philosophy well, then it's very John Stuart Mill. So if you understand their philosophy well, then it's very easy to understand the core ideas of ethics. Ethics is most closely related to the philosophy paper. That's why I have created here philosophy and ethics as a comprehensive, can say package rather than two separate things. We will see that also later on. So first important overlap will be with the ethics paper. Another important overlap will be with the essay. So every year they ask, at least half of essay paper is from philosophy. Half, think of it. So if you understand philosophy well, then it will be very easy for you to write. You can say you will get very different type of perspectives, quotations. In every class, I will give you many quotations, many perspectives of life, society, politics, governance. So in all of these things, in philosophy, will have a depth of understanding, and that depth of understanding will help you to write a very, very, very good and scoring essay paper. Let's take a small example. Once I was reading a book on Hegel. Remember, Hegel was one of the important philosophers in the yes, 10th year. So I was reading a book on Hegel, and one chapter in that book was, name of that chapter was, think of it, how beautiful it is. Name of that chapter was, Real is Rational. In fact, it is a quotation of Hegel. So real is rational, and the full quotation is rational is real. Real is rational and rational is real. That is a quotation of Hegel, one of the most famous, well-known quotation of Hegel. So name of the chapter itself was Real is Rational. And guess what? 2-3 years ago, there was an essay in the UPSC exam on this topic, Real is Rational. This was an essay. Now, think of it. Well, in that essay, again, I warn you, I tell you, can say here, that you don't have to write the whole philosophy of Hegel here. That is not necessary. But if you understand the philosophy of Hegel, and you know that how ideas of Hegel influenced people like Karl Marx, and then after the whole world after that, communism, liberalism, capitalism, etc., then just think of it, how well how good your essay would be. So every year they ask at least 4 to 5 questions directly from philosophy. So if you have understanding of philosophy, then it will be very easy for you to write a very systematic essay. Philosophy will be almost enough for your essay paper. Because essay, only 2 essays you have to write. You don't have to write 8 essays. And at least 4 or 5 essays are there from philosophy. So you can choose any 2 of them, Hopefully that both of these two will be from the two section, but it will be very easy for you to write a good essay. So essay paper is another one where you can say philosophy will be extremely useful for you. Then third paper where philosophy can be useful for you is GS paper 2. GS paper 2, political philosophy. Here particularly the second paper of your philosophy optional, socio-political philosophy, that will be extremely useful because paper 2 is basically about polity, governance, etc. So in that case, if you understand the ideas like justice, rights, equality, liberty, democracy, so all of these are the part of your polity paper as well. So if you understand the philosophy of all those things, underlying philosophy of all those things, just imagine how easy it will be for you to understand the polity part and write much better answer that people with no philosophy background may actually lack somehow. It will give you edge into that. So in GS paper 2 also philosophy can be extremely useful for you. And another one where philosophy can be very useful will be GS paper 1. Particularly here you can say Indian philosophy will be very useful here. So Indian philosophy, you can say things like art, culture. So these things will be very important for you. So if you understand the ideas of people like Charvak, Buddha, Jain, Mahavir, and other philosophical tradition, then it will be much easier for you to understand the Indian culture. So whole history will not be here important, but at least the art and culture part, your philosophy will help you a lot. That is another important reason for which you should. So I like to consider that suppose for example this is philosophy, then this might be ethics, that might be essay, this might be polity, paper 2 let's call it, and this might be paper 1. Paper 1. So this is how philosophy will overlap between all of these. So if you understand philosophy well, then at least these part of these papers will be much easier, much better for you to handle. I believe that if you, in your preparation, if you focus mainly on philosophy optional, ethics and essay, then it is possible for you to score around 300 marks in philosophy. Remember, that's very important thing, scoring potential of philosophy. It is possible in philosophy to score 300 marks. And if you understand philosophy, then it might be possible for you to score, say, 140 marks in ethics and 150 marks in essay also. Combined together, it can be around, at least, I'm not adding all of them together, at least 550 marks. So in these three papers, ethics, philosophy and essay, it is easy for you to score 550 marks. See that how important it can be possibly for you. So it can actually, and then after these two papers also, 20 marks, 30 marks extra on that also. So that is left in other three papers of your exam, mains exam. Even if you score 200 marks, then you will be through. So philosophy is much easier to score, much easier to learn. Not much time will be required. Least amount of time can give you maximum marks. So with philosophy optional, just in three parts of your syllabus, ethics, essay and philosophy, you can aspire to score 550 marks, even more than that. So that will be a crucial part of your preparation. So in this sense, you can see that very high scoring potential that we have, that strong overlap between. So overlap and scoring will be like this. Then after another reason for which you can say philosophy can help you. So it will help you to develop the critical thinking, analytical ability and all. So philosophy is about actually critical thinking. Everything must be critically examined, understood, every aspect of the thing. So if you understand philosophy well, if you understand the methods of philosophy, we'll talk about various methods of doubt, method of language analysis, we'll talk about all of that. So if you understand the core method of philosophy, then it will be very easy for you to deconstruct very complex arguments in a very simple manner. It will allow you to understand, to identify, to know the underlying assumption of something, or you can say some biases that people have, or you may possibly have in your thought. It can also allow you to present a very balanced point of view, considering the multiple perspective about the same thing. You will be much more wider in your perspective, in your understanding, in your expression in a way. Knowing philosophy will also help you to frame much logical and, you can say, persuasive argument also in your philosophy answer as well as in other papers also. They are very important. These skills are very important not only in philosophy but in essay, in GS, paper 4, ethics, and other papers also. So that's another important thing that helps, that is required, that philosophy will be beneficial for. Another important reason that you need to choose philosophy, consider choosing philosophy, is that in philosophy, as I told you earlier also, no background required. You don't have to have any background. In all other papers, you need to have a background. If you take geography, for example, then you have to study geography books of NCERT also, 6th, 7th standard also. You are expected to know about that. In philosophy, we don't have any book of NCERT. So till 12th class, philosophy is not actually a subject taught in the school and etc. in our country. So no background is required. Anybody, even I have seen that many doctors and engineers and people with a science background, physics, mathematics, etc., have been very easily able to grasp the core ideas of philosophy. So, because philosophy is very logical, philosophy is basically about the way our mind works. So it's very easy to start from the scratch and go to the finish just in 4 to 5 months. So no background is required. Anybody can think of choosing philosophy. Not only that, philosophy will also help you to develop your personality, and through that it will also help you in the interview part also of your UPSC exam. Because in interview, you will be able to have a much better philosophical understanding. You will be able to grasp the philosophical basis of various issues, social issues, moral issues, political issues, current affairs issues, etc., from the various philosophical background. That will help you to, well, provide a very systematic answer, speak well, present your arguments well, persuasively, critically. So that will help you to score good marks in the interview paper also. That is another reason for which you can possibly think of philosophy as an optional paper. And then finally, one more thing, that if as you study philosophy, you will realize that philosophy is very interesting, and I might possibly say a very transformative. Very transformative for you also. It will transform, you will become somebody else. So you will not be able to recognize that just in 4, 5 or 6 months, how much change will happen inside you. It will be a very enriching experience. You will have that sense of feeling of, well, wellness, goodness, or that self-esteem, self-understanding. So philosophy is very important for the development of the self. So these are the important reasons for which I can suggest to you that you can seriously think about, you can say, philosophy as an optional in your UPSC exam. That is about the importance of philosophy for UPSC. Now next, I would like to briefly talk about that in this course, what is it that I am going to propose? What is it that I will do for you in this class? Then after, I will tell you what I expect from you. Let's briefly talk about my role and your role. First thing, that as I told you that, no, I did not tell you. First of all, well, every day we have around 2 hours class. 2 hour per day class every day. So our class will be of 2 hours duration. I will not have a long class. No, normally in ethics, I take 3 hours class. But in philosophy, we will have only 2 hours class. The reason is that I do not want to be very, you can say, dense in my class. If you have 3 hours class, then perhaps you may not be able to grasp and retain the philosophical concepts. So we'll have 2 hours class every day, and I propose that whole of our course may be completed in around 100 to 120, maybe let's call it 25. 100 to 125 classes. So overall you can see this will be classes. So overall our course will be of, you can say, 200 to 250 hours duration. So 200 to 250 hours duration. That will be the duration of the course. It might take at least 4 months. We'll have 1 day off every week, Sunday, so as to recoup ourselves, and then after start refreshed. So around 3 to 4 months will be the duration, around 200 to 250 hours, around 100 to 120 days. So that is how our class will proceed, number 1. Now during these classes, we will cover every single topic. Our coverage of course will be very extensive. I will not leave even a single topic untouched in our class for guesswork or for, you can say, the some sort of leaving the things for you. So that is something that we will avoid altogether completely. So that is the second important thing that we will do. For each philosopher, this I told you earlier, for each philosopher we will devote around 2 to 3 classes. For some even 4, like Immanuel Kant maybe. So during these classes we'll discuss. So in these classes, as I told you earlier again, that these 2 to 3 classes, maybe 4 classes also, for each philosopher, we will discuss the core ideas of all these philosophers. But along with that, we'll talk about some peripheral ideas, as I told you earlier, as the socio-cultural background, the philosophical school of thought, tradition, the cultural background, historical background, political background, intellectual background. So we keep on talking about that also during these hours, so that you can have a very comprehensive understanding. We are not going to study in silos. We will have a very complete, comprehensive understanding, comprehensive coverage of each context in a proper context. Remember, context is very important. You cannot understand a philosophy without understanding the context. So we'll talk about context also, that circle, larger circles that I talked about, Western tradition, within that, the social tradition, cultural, intellectual, etc. So we'll situate each of the philosophy topic in a proper context. That is one approach that I would like to follow. Third, fourth important thing that I will do is that in each class I will dictate, that is my style, that's my method. I dictate brief, you can say, dictations about the core ideas of these philosophers, so that at the end of the course you will have a very exact and concise class note. So class note that will be directly dictated by the teacher, like this one. Then after we'll talk about, I will provide you a very comprehensive study material. That study material, because of course it will be prepared by me, that will be study material notes and all, that will complement the class note that you will have here. Both of them have to combine together to ensure your proper preparation. I will ensure somehow that our study material and class note combined together, they will be sufficient, they will be enough for you to prepare the UPSC exam. You don't have to read many books and all. Though if you want, I can suggest to you, but we will not require any other books. I have read all the books on your behalf, and I will tell you what these books actually tell us about all these philosophies. That is one thing. Next important thing that I will like to do here is that at the end of each philosopher, we'll discuss the previous year's questions related to that particular philosopher, in UPSC exam. So, because remember that only for each philosopher 3 to 4 questions can be possibly asked. So we'll see that how these 3-4 questions have been asked by UPSC exam in different language, in different combination, in different, you can say, permutation and all. So in each topic, we will discuss the previous year's question related to that. so that you can understand the concept. You should be able to relate what we discuss in the classroom, what you study at home, study material, etc., and what they ask in the UPSC exam. These things must be connected. So that relationship will happen in this particular part. This is what I propose to do in your exam, in these classes here for you. That is what my role will be for you. Now at the end of it, I will also like to discuss what do I expect from you as a student, because of course my role will be important. It's very well defined, I have already told you, but I do expect you also to do something. What are the things that you need to do? First important thing that you need to do is that attend all the classes. Let me emphasize it a bit more. All the classes. Don't miss even a single class, because remember, as I told you that we are going to have a whole, you can say, sequence of the thing. It's not that today I will discuss Kant and tomorrow I will discuss Descartes. No, there is a logic, there is a sequence, there is a flow in your syllabus. If you miss one particular class, then it might be a little difficult for you to grasp the next one. Proceed with the next one. Don't miss even a single class. Be very sincere, be very, you can say, regular in that. Attend all the class, number one. Secondly, inculcate the habit of writing in the class. Writing is very important, we will see. Two types of writing you have to do. One, writing inside the class I am talking about, not outside the class. Inside the class, two types of writing you have to do. First, let me call that as passive writing. Passive writing. What is that? Passive writing will be the one what I dictate actually, that I will tell you, okay, write this down. And then after I dictate the whole line or sentence. Maybe if the line is complex, then I will write that in the board also. Copy that. So passive writing is simply what I dictate, you have to reproduce in your paper. That should be done by you. And remember, don't think that, okay, I will write it later with some other student, copy it. No, writing is very important in the class. So what I dictate in the class, I could have provided you that in the paper also, PDF also, but I will not do that. I will dictate in the class and I will expect you to write in the class. Why it is so important? It is important because while dictating, if you dictate something and if you write something, then it will slightly slow down the pace of the class. Remember, philosophy is very conceptual. So if you keep on moving at a fast pace, then, that conceptualization in your mind may become a little difficult. So writing down will first of all, will slow down our pace, number one. Number two, writing in the class will also allow your mind to, you can say, conceptualize the ideas, to, you can say, internalize the ideas, to spend more time with that particular idea rather than moving to the next one. Because if you keep on moving from one idea to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next like this, then, something will be lost. So writing down will slow your mind. It will allow your mind to, you can say, digest what we are talking about. It will give you more time to think about that. Writing is important for that purpose. So it will give your mind an opportunity to remain with that particular topic for a longer period. And if you remain with that particular topic for some period, maybe 2, 3, 5, 4 minutes maybe, then it will go inside your mind. You will be able to internalize that. You will be able to make it your own. That is a very important thing. So do write in the classroom. Don't think that, okay, I'll do it later, copy for someone else, or sir se maang lenge, PDF, whatever. No, that should not be done. Second is active writing. That is something that you have to do on your own. It is not something that I will dictate. So along with the actual dictation that I will do in the classroom, you must make your personal side note. So I will suggest you have a pen of two colors. One color pen should be about passive writing, other for the active writing. Active writing means try to keep on making side notes, whatever I write on the board in the process of discussing, debating, arguing, some diagram, some flow chart, whatever. Write down all of that. So that is the second important. So this is what in this case, your mind has to be actively involved. In the first one, your mind will not be actively involved. You simply grasp, receive what I am telling you and reproduce that. In the second part, your mind will be actively involved in the whole process. That is the second important thing that you must do in the class. Then after, third thing is that for each for each 2 hours in the class, you must spend around 2 to 3 extra hours at home, devoted exclusively to philosophy. So during the period course, you can say period of this course, 2 hours classroom and at least 2 to 3 hours at home. 5 hours every day you must give to philosophy. Now, these 2-3 extra hours, what are the things that you need to do? First thing that you have to do is that revise everything of that today's class. Suppose 2 hours class we have today. So whatever we have studied, revise that first. That is one thing. Second thing, that read the study material related to that particular topic. In fact, I would suggest you that you must read the study material both before and after the class. Both before and so before you attend the classroom, read the course material. I will tell you every day that today I have discussed this, tomorrow we will discuss that. So I will tell you the topic of tomorrow's class every day. So before coming to the classroom, read the study material related to that. So that will give you some familiarity with the concepts that we are going to discuss in the classroom. It will also allow you to ask a relevant question, respond to something that I asked from you. So this interaction in the classroom is very important. You must ask questions, you must respond to my questions. There must be some sort of two-way communication in the classroom a bit. So before will help you in that, after will help you to consolidate all the things together. So every day read the study material related to that particular topic twice, before the class and after the class. That is the second thing that you have to do. Third thing that you have to do here is that at home, 2-3 hours extra that you have to study, make a personal note. Of each topic, which should involve the passive writing, active writing, and the study material. So combine them all together, and on that particular topic, make a note of that. So by the end of the course, you should have 3 types of note, 4 rather. One is actual dictation. Second is your active note making in the classroom. Third will be study material, and finally will be a combination of all of that in your own language. So make your note as far as possible in your own language. As far as possible, make the notes in your own language. That's very important. Language, as we'll see, is very important. Next, do all these 3 things every single day. Don't postpone it that kal kar lenge. Nahin. That must be done. Even if you have to miss your sleep, your food, miss your sleep, miss your food, but don't miss these 3 things. So this must be done on that particular day. If you miss by one day, then it will create problem. Don't do that. Be very sincere in that. Be very serious in that. That is one important thing. Not only that, during this period, I will also suggest 5th one. 4th was doing this the same day. Don't postpone that for the next day. 5th thing that you need to do is that revise the last 4 to 5 days. Note that you have made. Every day that 4-5 days revision must be done. Remember, revision is the key. If you don't revise well, then your mind will be. It is said that whatever you learn on a day, if you're learning something new, then within the 24 hours, almost 70% of that will be lost. Revision will bring it back to your memory. So I believe here, suppose for example, in a week, if you talk about Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday and Saturday. Now, suppose for example, whatever you, suppose it is Tuesday today, then first thing that you have to do is revise what was done on Monday, then revise the Tuesday, then study the present days. Then Wednesday, before you study something new, you must revise what was done on the last 2 days. If you do something on the 4th day, then you must revise that first, that second, that third, and then this. So by this you can say every topic would be at least 4 to 5 times it will be revised, and that will be enough for your mind to grasp it completely. Revision is very important. Every day you should do that. Maybe before you start with the next topic, you must do that. Then after, that is the next important thing. And last thing that you have to do is that write answers. We will discuss the previous year's questions in our class, and you should write those answers. So it's very important because writing is the only thing that that will help you to score marks. Knowledge is not enough. Writing must be done. So you must write down your answers properly. Writing is very important because there is a famous quotation. I will keep on giving you these quotations. Write them down. So there is a famous quotation: reading makes you aware and writing makes you exact. That's why I told you revision must also involve lots of writing. But at the end of it, do the proper writing of the, you can say, the previous year's question. That will give you confidence in your understanding, in your preparation, etc. So that is one thing that you must do. So that is the next important thing that you have to do. Another thing that I will suggest you to do here, along with all these things, is that always remember philosophy is about thinking. Philosophy is essentially about thinking. So in order to understand philosophy and know philosophy, it's very important that you should inculcate a proper habit of thinking. Thinking particularly, try to think about that particular philosopher. That particular philosopher that you are studying on that day. So for example, if you are studying Plato, then for those 4 or 5 days when we will discuss Plato, then think like Plato. Think like Plato. So think that whatever ideas that Plato had, that we have discussed, it is your own idea. Think like, okay, this is what your ideas are, this is what you are. So for 3-4 days, become Plato. Think like Plato, and you can say, try to conceptualize, look at the things like Plato. So for 3-4 days, you should become Plato. Then after, next day, you will start Aristotle. Now, once you start Aristotle, then think like Aristotle. Think like, you can say, become Aristotle. You can criticize Plato now. Aristotle was sort of critique of Plato. So now you can criticize Plato. No, Plato was wrong. Let me be something else. So next day, for next 4 or 5 days, you should think like Aristotle. Think like that, chew their ideas, internalize their ideas, try to use their ideas to understand the world, the events around you, social, political, cultural, religious, everything. Think like that. So by the end of the course, you can see, I might possibly say you have around 20 reincarnations. In Western philosophy, and 10 reincarnations in the Indian philosophy, 30. So by the end of the course, you should have 30 lives, philosophical life, intellectual life that you should have lived. So this is what very important, that will help you a lot in order to, that might be possibly the 4th one, in order to learn philosophy well. So be a philosopher for those 5 days, 4 or 5 days. Not a new philosopher, but that particular philosopher. That is one thing that you have to do. Next important thing that you have to do is that keep yourself highly motivated in the class. Highly motivated in the class. Remember a few things, that what we are going to do, just think, is such a complex thing that we are doing. What we are doing is that we are actually studying 2,500 years of philosophy in just 200 to 250 hours. It's a very important thing that you have to remember. 2,500 years of philosophizing we are going to study just in 250 hours, or you can say 100 or 125 days. That's not an easy task. So that is one thing. Another thing that you need to remember, that in these 4 months, you have to study what normally students in college and university study 3 to 5 years. Remember, your course will be almost equivalent to graduation and post-graduation. So graduation or post-graduation. So 3 years to 5 years. So what students in the college and university study in 3 to 5 years, you have to study in, well, you can say 100 days or 120 days or so. So that is a very complex task, that is a very demanding, daunting task. Because of that, our class will be very dense, it will be very exact, it will be very compact, it will be very focused. We will not waste our time in, you can say, making the class interesting. So there will not be many jokes, there will not be many diversions, there will not be many, you can say, extra unnecessary things in the classroom. Every single word that I will speak in the classroom will be related to the course itself. So I believe that the beauty of philosophy, the knowledge of philosophy itself will help you to keep hooked up in the classroom for these 2 hours. So always keep in mind that you haven't come to this classroom not for entertainment, not for time pass. You are here to learn. Every day you should learn something important, something significant, something substantial. So will not waste any time. Always remember, your task in the classroom, your purpose in the classroom is just to learn philosophy. Remember it, perform well, and score best in the classroom. For that, it's very important for you to keep yourself focused in the class. So don't expect much entertainment, joke, etc. in the classroom. Classroom will be only and only about concepts in philosophy. That is one thing. And finally, last one, very important one, that you should work upon your language. Your language must be good. Work upon your language, particularly in this case, your English. So your English should be is very important. So first thing that you have to do, maybe before you join the class course or during the period also, that evaluate your English. Is your English up to the standard of UPSC? English is important for all the papers. That in philosophy, English will become even more important because philosophy is, as we'll see in tomorrow's class, philosophy is very abstract. So for anything which is so abstract, to write that down in concrete language, you should have a good command over the language. Your language must be good. So evaluate your English. If your English is up to the mark, to the UPSC standard, be happy and come here. Proceed with the course. But if your English is not very good, then work upon your English. How can you do that? 3 things. First of all, build a good vocabulary. Vocabulary is very important. So if your vocabulary is not good, then first thing that you have to do is to do that. Every day I will suggest to you that learn around 10 new words. That word you can take from the newspaper, from anything. Make a diary of that. So if you learn 10 new words every day, then in 1 year you will have around 4,000 words. So that's very important. 3 to 4,000 new words. So that is very important. That will give you a good startup. So first of all, build a good vocabulary, number 1. Number 2, inculcate the habit of reading. Read a lot. This has become a big problem in modern time. Today we are living in a time of social media where you can say the small sentences and the WhatsApp type of, you can say, emojis or what we can see. That is the way we express ourselves. We read that, we express that. So we have become very, short and so don't be that. Inculcate the habit of reading. Read proper books, read proper articles, read proper chapters. Reading is very important. That will help you to grasp the intricacies of English language. Reading is very important. Don't simply go on the social media type of reading. Read proper books. It might be even novel, stories, if your time permits. That is one thing. And third, practice writing. Every day you must write a few pages by your own. Take any topic and write an essay on that. 2 pages, 3 pages. As I told you, there is a very famous quotation. Remember, again I quote, reading makes you aware, writing makes you exact. So writing will help you to develop a good language in that sense. So write every day. It can be, if you read an article in the newspaper, then summarize that article in your own language, in your way. Spend half an hour for that. Every day, half an hour you should spend on writing well. So build a good vocabulary, read a lot, and write a little. These are the 3 things that you need to do. And if you do all of these 3 things, then you can say what I do and what you will do. We can complement each other, and we can, well, prepare very well for philosophy and score very good marks in this paper, which can play a very important role in your success in the UPSC exam. So that is about your this orientation class here. So here we have talked about the whole of the syllabus, how the syllabus can be conceptualized. Second thing, we have seen that why philosophy should be your choice of optional in the UPSC exam. Then after, we have seen what I will do in what I propose to do in this classroom here, what I expect, and finally, what I expect from you in this classroom. So that is all about in today's class. Tomorrow we'll talk about next 3 classes, maybe 3-4 classes will be about the foundation of philosophy. So in next class, we'll talk about what exactly philosophy is, what exactly philosophers do, and what we have to do as a prospective philosophy student. For that, I'll see you tomorrow. So see you for that.